Welcome to episode 14 of Get Savvy, the podcast for business owners who want to claim back their time through the power of delegation, streamlining, and productivity. I'm Tisha, your host, and today I have a very, very special guest with me, Cathy from BSI People Skills. Cathy is the CEO and founder of BSI, a leadership coaching organization helping businesses understand their people through the power of tools such as everything disc personality profiles. Cathy has a wealth of knowledge and experience both nationally and internationally, and her knowledge transcends cultural bounds, making her an expert in people and their relationships, which are just at the center of everything she does. She has a passion for empowering her clients and is able to ignite that leadership at every level of organizations. So it's really, really great to have you here, Cathy. Thank you for joining me.
You're very welcome. It's great to be here. And you've given me a doozy of a topic, so I'm really looking forward to it.
I was just going to say, I've given you a very, very interesting and big topic today. So, yeah, appreciate you taking this time. So, we today are talking about equality versus equity, and they're two different concepts, but they're often used interchangeably, with equality referring to treating everyone the exact same way, regardless of differences or circumstances, with the aim to ensure fairness by treating everyone the same way. And then on the flip side, equity, providing individuals with what they need to achieve the same level of opportunity and outcomes as others, but actually taking into account their unique circumstances or differences. So both seeking fairness, but yeah, two different approaches to it. So yeah, we'll do a bit of a deeper dive into this. And yeah, the questions, Cathy, are very intense. So we'll just see where this leads us.
Absolutely. Mm.
So, why don't I start off by asking you, what does equality look like in the workplace, and what does it mean in this context?
I think you've defined it fairly well in the definition that you've given there. It's where you're looking at your people and you're basically treating them all the same. So examples of that would be, for example, a step pays in big corporate organizations. You've worked there for this number of years, therefore you're on this step in the pay grade. You've got
Mm.
these particular qualifications, therefore you're on, this step of the pay grade.
Yeah.
And those are the sorts of examples of treating everybody the same, the equality that
Hmm.
comes in.
Yeah. And so, other than equal pay,
Mhm.
how are businesses implementing equality in their
Yeah.
teams?
That's a really good question. There are other things about the equal pay, and if you look at so many things that come in our job descriptions and our laws and those sorts of things around work, you've also got, your sick pay. You've got,
Yeah.
this number of days of sick leave. You've got this number of days of holiday pay, and those types of things are all to do with the providing equality
Mm.
for people's employees. It's regardless of who they are, regardless of where they've come from. This is the number of years you've worked, this is how many weeks pay you get, and this is what it looks like. And so a lot of our laws are shaped around that too. Mm.
Yeah. Yeah, and so, yeah, I guess a lot of it's law and essentially guidelines that businesses are just following, and that's kind of
Yes.
a lot of it, yeah.
Mm.
So, do you see any downsides to equality in business?
Yeah, I do, because we're a diverse nation, we're a diverse group of people, and when we're looking at equality, you get the this where the discussions around pay equity and things that have been so prominent over the last few years, where you've got largely female industries which have been traditionally very, very underpaid just because they were female industries. And so you've got your health, your education, your care industries, which have been very, very lowly paid. And so there's been a large move, if you like, to have that recognition of that this job is at the same sort of level as this job here, even though they're in different industries, and therefore the pay should be equal across that sort of thing. So yeah, it is important to think about the different people that are involved, the skills that they have brought into a particular role, and is that fair and just, rather than okay, they've had X number of years in this particular role, and therefore you should be on that sort of pay. I realise we're talking quite a lot about pay at the moment, and we will move on from pay, I'm sure. Because as we're looking at this particular topic, it brings up so many other different discussions. I've actually, as I was preparing for this, I've actually talked with lots of people, including around the world, talking about what equity, what equality look like in different countries and different
Yeah.
environments. So it was really interesting, for example, talking with a man from Sri Lanka about this sort of issue in his world. And he was saying it is a very, very topical issue, if you like, that
Yeah.
there is no equity, there is no equality
Mm.
within the Sri Lankan business systems, if you like.
Yeah.
And another man in Canada was talking about Walmart, for example, and how you've got what looks like a very diverse workforce, but
Mm.
again, you're not actually treating people as they're wanting to be treated in a way. For example, he was talking about the fact that they hire people with diverse needs. So they have people with Down syndrome, with other different intellectual disabilities and so on. And this is a very fraught topic because we're bringing up vocab that is quite triggering for some people
Yeah.
here. And so, but it is part of this discussion, and so I am going to bring it up and talk about what is happening and what he was describing. And so you have these people that, yes, they've employed them and they've given them a job, but
Mm.
they have no opportunity to be able to move from that job. For example, they are on the trolleys, or so
Yeah.
they're always getting the trolleys, or they are standing at the bottom of the elevator, so that they're directing people to different floors, but they will never have the opportunity to be a cashier, to have any sort of training. And if they get sick of it, then they get to
Mm.
leave. So that it's tokenism is coming up again and again here in these sorts of conversations that I was having with people. And another thing that came up talking with equity was somebody was talking about the equity of outcomes type
Yes.
thing, where you're wanting to have everybody able to produce the same outcome. And there's a whole dystopian sort of feeling behind this, where you're almost giving people handicaps in order to be able to bring them down
Mm.
to a level, as opposed to helping to raise
Yeah.
people up
Yeah.
to be able to produce the best that they
Mm.
can in their particular situations.
Yeah. Sort of keeping them in their little box and cool,
Yes,
you're doing what I need you to, and that's where you're going to stay.
yes, yes,
Yeah. Yeah.
yes.
Exactly. Yeah. And a lot of the time, well, some people don't actually realize the difference between equality and equity, and the default often for a lot of people is that equality is the best thing for everyone because then it's fair. That is seen as fairness. But as soon as you start talking about diversity, like you've mentioned there, in any different sense, then yeah, there are all of those different circumstances, and yeah, and letting people have those different opportunities and helping them get there,
Mm,
that
mm,
isn't as considered with equality.
mm. And I think there are other examples in New Zealand as well. I've talked about some of those examples that
Mm.
are overseas, but you're looking at office furniture, for example, and you're looking at, for example, people that are hearing impaired or sight impaired, and how can you make your workplace able for them to be able to
Yeah.
function, people with physical disabilities. And so
Mm.
you're starting to look at the individuals that you have working for you and looking
Yes.
at what do they need, how can we make this work, rather than, no, this is how we do it. And that is because otherwise you're missing out on so many of the skills that different people can bring into your workplaces. And yeah, I know from the work that I do with teams that a diverse workplace will always give you better results
Yeah.
if you are working together as a team.
Mm.
And so there, if you can set up your environment where you're looking at the different people and you're looking at the strengths that they bring, and then looking at, okay, how can we support them to be able to do their best work?
Yeah.
And when you've got that, then you've got equity in a workplace.
Mhm. Yeah. So We've kind of been touching on equity already, but how would you say it differs from equality? What's sort of that dividing
Mm,
factor?
mm. I think it's when you're looking at, rather than looking at from here, this is what we're giving everybody and it's equal,
Mhm.
right? As opposed to, these are my people and what do they need to perform at their best?
Yeah.
And if we're doing that, then that's equity.
Yeah.
Whereas, it's coming from them. This is what they need,
Yes.
as opposed to, this is what I'm giving you.
Yeah. That's a great way to describe it. Yeah.
Mm.
And you see people quite often leave jobs as well when they aren't being empowered, like you say, through just being given training to actually utilize the skills that they have or could have and be really great at. And yeah, those aren't being utilized. So they'll move on. They'll look for somewhere that will offer them that.
Yes, yes, 100%,
Mm.
100%,
So
definitely.
what would you say then equity looks like in the workplace if we're actually seeing it?
Yeah, it's looking literally at, who are my people
Hmm.
and what do they need to perform to their best? Is there particular training that they need? Is there different resources that they need? For example, businesses will think, well, I need to provide a computer and a computer and a whatever resources that people need. But
Yeah.
do actually some people need, for example, standing desks because they've got back problems, and so therefore they need different equipment in order to be able to perform? Do they need different software because,
Mm.
for example, they are sight impaired or hearing impaired, in order to be able to read or to be able to interact with people in the
Mhm.
way that they need? It's also, when you're thinking about, this is very typical as well, because more and more people are doing the hybrid workplaces.
Yeah.
So an example of equality there is, no, we all come into the office, we all have the same start times, we all have the same finish times, right? And
Mm.
equity is looking at,
Yes.
okay, this is the work that needs to get done this week. So what sort of hours are you going to work? Does it work better for you to be able to work at home? Does it work better to be, how many days does it work to come into the office? You're thinking about what they need, as opposed to setting the cookie cutter approach there.
Mm. And even thinking about parents in the workplace, single mothers and that kind of thing as well, like you say, with the work hours and just small changes that you can give people in a workplace it's really often quite a small accommodation that just makes them feel valued as a
Yes.
team member.
Yes, yes, absolutely. And another example of that is job sharing and things. And I've quite a few of the teams that I've been working with, they do have people job sharing. 2 days a week is one particular person, 3 days a week is another person, and they're doing the same job, which is a full time job, but they're sharing it between
Mm.
them. And they can chop and change between themselves. If one particular week a day doesn't work for one of them, then they'll swap it with the other person. But the work's being done, and that's a really good example of equity as well.
Mm. Yeah, and what about obviously you're an expert here in terms of the different personalities with equity. That is something that isn't necessarily considered with equality, but even just communicating with your team in different ways and yeah, responding to maybe a disciplinary situation in a different ways and actually accommodating those different personalities.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. And I'm really glad that you've brought that up, because
Mm.
that comes back to the individual's needs, doesn't it? When we're thinking of the different personality types, each of them like to work in different ways,
Yeah.
and they have different needs for communication. They have different needs for for quiet, if you like, for
Yes.
interaction with other people. They have different needs in the way that they like to be praised. They have different needs in the way that they like to collaborate with other people. And so, how do you give each of your team members the support that they need in order to be able to be their best selves in the
Yeah.
workplace? And that again is another example of equity.
Mm. Yeah,
Mm.
there are really so many out there.
Yes, 100%. Yeah, very definitely.
So, do you think that equality solves all of the limitations that oh, sorry, equity solves all of the limitations that equality has?
I think it does if you're looking at it in a way where you're looking at what your people need and
Mhm.
enabling them to have that support as opposed to just providing that cookie cutter approach. It always comes back to your people and who are your people and what do they need in order to be empowered. If you start to put rules on that and to try and make cookie cutter type approaches, that's when you get into more and more difficulties. And yet that's one of the things that's really hard when your organization grows, because you do need to be able to take,
Yeah.
the more decisions that you're keeping back, the harder it gets, the more complex it becomes. And so, you are wanting to try and keep things simple within a
Mm,
business. It's almost like a guiding principle, if you like, is to keep things keep things simple. Yeah, so I think one of the things that can really help in any organization is to keep those chains of communication open and
mm,
have that question there of what do you need?
yeah,
Yeah. What's
mm,
not working? What do you need? So
yeah,
that you can always get people to bring their best selves to work.
yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, like you say, it would be hard once you're getting those bigger organizations and big corporates and stuff, and yeah, would you say for those types of businesses, it's just making sure that their people leaders at all the different levels are really conscious of that equity?
Mm. Yes, I think it is. And I think another thing that's
Mm,
really important with it is to stay being curious, because especially as you're looking at some of the bigger organizations, including some of the government departments and the bigger corporates, you're hearing the words around diversity. And I'm going to bring this up again, the diversity. We want a diverse team. And in terms of recruiting people, many people can see this as being, I want a person of color, or I want a
mm,
female, in order to bring some sort of nominal
yeah,
looking like equity in the workplace. And I think there is a real danger with that
yeah,
as well, because if you haven't got the the systems in place to support that diversity, that the people, regardless of background, regardless of gender, if you haven't got that culture in place across your organization, then you're not solving any problems. In fact, you're bringing bigger problems in and making
mm,
making your workplace quite unsafe as well.
yeah. That is a fantastic point, honestly, yeah. Yeah, yeah, the culture has to be right regardless to begin
Yes,
with, and when
yes,
obviously you have that opportunity when you're starting small to really get that right and be really close with your people. If you do have a small business, you have that opportunity
yes,
right there.
yes.
So, yeah, getting that
Mm,
right. That's a great point.
mm.
So, could you give me an example then of an equal opportunity given to a team member versus an equitable one?
An equal opportunity would be having the same presents given for every birthday
Mhm.
to each team member, for example, which is might be great if you're giving people facials until your first team member comes along who actually doesn't want to be touched, or
Yep.
might not want to go and have a facial ever. So,
Yeah.
that would be an example of not an equal not a good idea, if you like, although it's equal. So an equitable one would be actually thinking about what would that person like for this particular present for their birthdays, to be able to
Yeah.
think about, we've got this amount of money to spend, what does that person need? I mean, it's almost like a trivial example, and yet it makes such a
Yeah.
difference to people's sense of well-being within a team.
No, exactly. It's the simplest things, and it kind of just boils down to actually caring about each individual that you have on your team. And it's honestly as simple as that. It's listening to what they say they like, it's listening to the people that are important in their lives so you can have conversations with them about it. It's listening when they tell you that they're struggling with something and all of those things, like you've said.
Yes. Yes,
It is really
and a
that
lot of
simple.
a lot of that comes down to your intention, doesn't it? When you're going back to the diversity comment that I was just making before, that if your intention is to do it because you're playing lip service to
Yeah.
some sort of ideal, then you have a real danger. But if you're doing
Mm.
it in order to be able to
Yeah.
to build an amazing team of a really diverse range of people, and you've got
Yeah.
that curiosity, that listening, you're really
Yes.
interested in each of the people, and each member of your team is actually interested in each other, then you have the possibility to build an amazing, equitable organisation that
Yeah.
people will love to be part of.
Mm. So, how can business owners implement equity in their team?
Yeah, is to actually think about your people and to think about what it is that they need, to start looking at what do each of your team members need in order to be able to produce their best work.
Yeah.
And when you're starting to do that and focusing on each of the individuals, then you've got an amazing possibility.
Yeah.
Mm.
Cool. Well, that's all of my very intense questions. So, do you have any final remarks to add? Anything that we've missed off that you'd like to include as part of this big, big conversation?
Yeah, it is a really, really challenging area. So just keep your people at the forefront of
Yeah.
any business that you're in. The teams, as you're building your teams, as you're building yourself as leaders within your business, the most important thing to do is to be able to learn about yourself as a leader, as a person, as a human, and to be able to start to look at the humanness of each of your people in your team. And when you're doing that, then you're on the right path.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you so much for joining me today, Cathy. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you here today and your expertise on the subject.
Thank you very much. It's been great to be here.
Cool. So if you listening want to hear more about Cathy or learn about BSI People Skills and what they do, please head over to their website, bsipeopleskills.co.nz. And thank you everyone for listening. Don't forget to rate, like, and subscribe to the Get Savvy podcast.
Thanks, everyone.